Hello, friends, and thank you as always for visiting the Legend Sports Universe YouTube channel, Legend Sports Universe, where legends play forever. This is the Franchise Stars Baseball League Rookie Draft, taking place on June 5th of Year 3 of the FSBL, where we will determine the players who will join the Franchise Stars Baseball League next season for Year 4. They will not be able to join their franchises here in Year 3. They do not take effect until after this season is over, but we will get a look through all 30 franchises, the 5 players who will join those franchises next season. Again, if you are unfamiliar with the FSBL, first and most importantly, thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you will like and subscribe and follow all the action here on the channel. Each franchise has a 100-player master pool of top players in their history. There are no doppelgangers. It's just players are only assigned to one team. Each position is ranked based on WAR at that position for the franchise. Year 1 had 40 players from that 100-player master pool randomly chosen as the starting list for each franchise. Each subsequent draft has 4 other players from that master pool assigned to the team, as well as 1 random Negro Leaguer throughout history. That will give this a franchise career mode format. We plan on this going for 20 plus seasons if all goes well. So without further ado, let's take a look at who's coming in to the FSBL for Year 4. So we start off in the National League East, and we'll open up with the Atlanta Braves, who had a very solid draft, I feel like, here. Herman Long, a terrific defensive shortstop, also had a little bit of thunder in his bat. He was a 19th century, one of the top players of the 19th century. Herman Long, very, very solid at short. He should probably figure to be an upgrade from Andrelton Simmons, especially as Simmons has had a bit of an erratic season this year for the Braves. Rico Carty and Ron Gant, a pair of very strong outfielders. Carty, a one-time batting champion. Gant, a powerful outfielder. Very athletic, a bit of injury problems in his career, but Gant was very solid, and Kerry Lightenberg will help bolster a Braves bullpen. But nobody huge top of the chain as far as the Braves, but those are all solid contributors for Atlanta, who should be able to factor in to the Braves in year number 4. We move next to the Florida Marlins, and if you recall, the Marlins a year ago had an exceptional draft. Gary Sheffield, who was in the top 3 of Rookie of the Year voting, but they also added a pair of terrific starters in Sandy Alcantara and Jose Fernandez. This draft, well, it doesn't come anywhere as near that. Pat Rapp, shortstop Miguel Rojas, and a pair of relievers, Luis Aquino and Brian Morris, not going to make any real significant impact for the Marlins in year 4 or beyond, frankly. Pete Washington, not a bad Negro League outfielder. Pete Washington might actually be able to factor in for some depth for the Marlins a bit going forward. But this is a pretty empty draft for the Marlins as they try to manage to hang on the fringe of potential playoff wild card contention in the National League. We move on to the New York Mets, and the Mets with a bit of an interesting draft here. John Stearns was a terrific catcher when he first came up, and he had a couple of really, really strong seasons. The Mets moved him to try to get him to play third base a little bit because he was so athletic, and Stearns ended up tearing up his thumb really badly. When he was at third, he was never quite the same player. After that, he was a college defensive back, tough as nails kind of guy. But if Stearns can play to his peak, he's going to factor into the catcher equation with the Mets, at least in the near term, with the current catching makeup being Todd Hundley and Joe Ferguson acquired in a trade with the Astros. The other guy who could factor in here is Yoenis Cespedes. Cespedes could potentially be the left fielder of the next few years for the Mets. Right now, they've got Shane Mack, who was acquired in a trade with the Twins, and Bernard Gilkey out there, and neither of them are world beaters by any means. If Cespedes can play to his peak potential, Cespedes can certainly make an impact offensively for the Mets. Ken Boswell, really a depth second baseman. Bob Apodaca, who is a longtime Mets pitching coach in real life. Apodaca will have a crack to crack that Mets bullpen that has been kind of a weak link for them over these first 2.5 seasons of the FSBL. A lot of attention was being paid on this draft for this team north of the border, the Montreal Expos, who after 2 years of making the postseason in surprising fashion here in the FSBL have had the bottom just cave in on them. Here in year 3, they are in the cellar. They are playing less than .400 baseball at the moment. They just can't do anything this season. They can't hit, they can't pitch, and pretty much everything that has gone right for them in the first 2 years of the FSBL has gone wrong for them here in year number 3. There is not a lot of help coming in this draft. Mike Jorgensen, a decent role player, backup, platoon guy at best at first base. Can he fit into that Nick Johnson, Adam LaRoche, group over at first for the Expos? Possibly. Chad Cordero could help that Expos bullpen that has had some rough spots over the first couple of years. Nelson Santovania behind the plate is not really going to be a factor with the big club, and neither is Ildemaro Vargas at third base. And one of our favorite deals, the one-name Negro Leaguer, a reliever just known as Walker, is not going to be much of a factor either for the Expos. So a disappointing draft for an Expos group that had a very good initial 40-player draft to open things up here for the FSBL, but now is going to kind of need to add to that in order to keep pace with the better teams in the division, and this draft falls well short of doing that for Montreal. The best draft among the teams of the National League East, and frankly, one of the best drafts probably of any team in the FSBL here in year 3, goes to the Philadelphia Phillies, who end up adding Pete Alexander to their starting rotation and Chase Utley at second base, along with the powerhouse, the Bull, Greg Lazinski, out in the outfield. Bob Allen will kind of be a role player, backup, depth shortstop. Mickey Tabom as a Negro Leaguer won't really be too much of an impact here. But your focus on for the Phillies, no disrespect even to Luzinski, who can certainly contribute with some thunder, but Pete Alexander and Chase Utley are huge additions for the Phillies. Alexander will slot right into the rotation as a rookie, obviously, no doubt there, and he'll join an already pretty solid group. Jim Bunning, Al Orth, Cole Hamels, and Cliff Lee are there at the moment, and Pete Alexander will certainly help bolster that rotation. Juan Samuel has done a fine job at second base, but Chase Utley will supplant him, if not immediately. It won't take long. Utley at a minimum will be the platoon, the left-handed batting part of the platoon there, I would assume, in year 4. But adding Alexander and Utley, a huge boost for a Phillies squad that frankly is disappointed to this point a bit. And I thought they were going to contend here in year 3, and at least through the first 2 months and change of the season, the Phillies have found themselves just struggling to find any consistency. But the additions of Alexander and Utley could vault the Phillies to the top of this division in year 4. We move on to the National League Central, and the Cincinnati Reds continue to try to load up their bullpen. They already have John Franco, Jeff Brantley, Rob Dibble, who they drafted last year. They got Clay Carroll out there, and now they add the hard-throwing duo of Aroldis Chapman and Norm Charlton. So the Reds should have a very, very formidable bullpen. They already do, and they add to that. The Reds' issue kind of rests elsewhere, though. They could use some starting pitching. They could also use a little more thunder in the lineup. Wally Post might be a decent sleeper pick here. Wally Post did not have a long peak in his career. He does strike out a lot. He doesn't draw many walks, but he hit 40 homers in his career once. He broke 30 homers another one or two times. So Wally Post is a potential kind of sleeper pick here for the Reds, who could end up playing a bit of a role for them as early as next year. George Carr was a very good Negro League first baseman. He played a little bit of outfield too, but he's really a first baseman, which is a position where the Reds are actually in pretty good shape right now. So the Carr pick is a little bit of an interesting one, but again, with the DH as a factor, you could find a way to get George Carr some at-bats for the Reds. So it's not exactly fitting needs for them, but these are guys who could end up playing a role for the Reds. Not a bad draft, and it potentially could be a very good draft for the Reds if all of these guys click. Ray Mueller, a depth guy at catcher. Ernie Lombardi will hold down the fort in Cincinnati. He's on his way to a possible batting title actually here in year 3, so they're set at that position. But the Reds draft is going to be one of the more intriguing ones to watch over the next couple of years. If this loading the bullpen tactic works out for the Reds in a pretty tightly packed NL Central, the Reds could make a move. We move next to the Cardinals, and the Cardinals with a terrific draft here. A pair of Hall of Famers lead the way for them. Lou Brock and Ted Simmons will join the Cardinals for year 4. A case of the rich getting richer. The Cardinals, 2-time defending champions of the NL Central. They're in a dogfight with the Pirates here in year 3. But the pickup of Lou Brock certainly is going to make this outfield in St. Louis very interesting. You got a couple guys who could be the odd man out there. You're going to have Brian Jordan and J.D. Drew in particular probably, kind of fighting to be the guy who stays and the guy who gets sent down to AAA for depth next year, because I think Lou Brock is going to pretty much start right off the bat with the big club. Ted Simmons, they already have Yadi Molina there, but Molina hasn't hit really at all, particularly this season. Simmons is going to certainly get a good amount of playing time, if not the lion's share, right off the bat next year. Simba is going to be an impact player for them next year as well. Having the pair of Simmons and Yadi Molina. Listen, he may not have been Yadi, but Ted Simmons was a terrific defensive catcher in addition to being an offensive force. So if you can get both sides of the ball taken care of with Ted Simmons, the Cardinals are going to opt for that, I think. And Mike Mowry is depth. The Negro League outfielder picked up Pinky Ward is going to be a depth guy. Joe Cunningham was a very solid outfielder. He didn't have a heck of a lot of pop, but he hit for a good average. He walked a ton, and Cunningham will be a nice depth piece for the Cardinals as well. So an exceptional draft for the 2-time defending NL Central champs. Perhaps none of the older franchises in baseball had a worse initial draft than the Chicago Cubs. With the exception of Fergie Jenkins, they really came up empty. And even their first draft, the first rookie draft, they didn't really add too much. They picked up Ron Santo in last year's draft to try to start a climb a bit. This is a really solid draft for the Cubs and their franchise that desperately needed it. The top name on that list is the Hall of Famer Joe Tinker, of course, immortalized in the Tinker Never Had a Chance poem. However, I'm not really sure that Tinker provides a huge upgrade, if any, over the current shortstop Bill Dowling. Tinker was a fantastic defender, but a below-average offensive player, so I'm not really sure that there's a huge upgrade there. To me, the real benefit is from the next 3 guys, particularly the next 2, the outfield duo of Bill Nicholson and Andy Pafko. The Cubs, the master player pool that started all of this, has a list of 20 outfielders. Teams started with 8, and then the rest of the pool comes in these future drafts. The Cubs didn't get anybody in their top 8 WAR list of outfielders until this year. The first 2 guys to break who are in that top 8 to join the Cubs are Nicholson and Pafko, which could be a huge benefit. A couple of 5-time All-Stars with 30 home run potential. Big upgrade to a Cubs offense that desperately needs the help. Lon Warnecki was also a 5-time All-Star. Won an ERA title. He could bolster the Cubs rotation a bit as well. So a really solid draft here for the Cubbies, who are been able to be on the fringe of the playoff picture, but never really threaten a spot by the time the season closes. With the addition of Santo last year and then Nicholson and Pafko, in this year's rookie draft, I think the Cubs might be able to get a little bit closer to the hunt for the postseason. Up next, we have the Milwaukee Brewers. Not a hugely impactful draft for the Brewers. Teddy Higuera is a nice starter. He should be able to crack that rotation next year, and should solidify it a bit. But the rest of this roster, Jose Valentin. There's a guy named Robin Yount playing shortstop for the Brewers right now. Valentin isn't going to pass him, although Valentin will provide a little bit of versatility. He played all around the infield. Decent defender, had a little bit of pop in his bat. Jeremy Jeffress in that bullpen. The Brewers' bullpen has actually been pretty good. Jeffress should add to that. Ron Theobald isn't really going to do anything. The interesting guy here is Bingo DeMoss, and DeMoss is one of those Negro Leaguers, and there's plenty of these guys where the stories about him are kind of better than the stat record on him. So it's a little bit hard to kind of evaluate him necessarily perfectly. His offensive numbers that are on record are subpar. He was considered an exceptional defender. He was also universally regarded as one of the best bunters ever. But you also had polls of people in the Negro Leagues back in the day who asked how the best second baseman in Negro League history was, and DeMoss was considered that by a lot of people. So he's a kind of an interesting guy to get in the record. He'll probably end up rated well enough to at least challenge taking over. They're not great at second base, the Brewers. Fernando Vina and Ricky Weeks have been the guys in that spot over these first 3 years. So DeMoss should have an opportunity when all is said and done to at least get himself an opportunity to crack the Brewers lineup. So there's been a lot of conversation over the first 3 years of the FSBL about the Pittsburgh Pirates being one of these teams that just has not gotten any of their really top guys, with the exception of Willie Stargell, who's been terrific for them. But obviously Pirates history has a ton of terrific players, Hall of Fame players, and they finally get one into the fold here, and they do it in a big way, as Roberto Clemente will join the Pittsburgh Pirates next year. They will get the cannon-armed, sweet-swinging right fielder, and Clemente will make a huge difference to the Pittsburgh Pirates next season, adding offense and defense and some class to the team. That's not a knock on the current Pirates. That's just more a compliment to Clemente. But obviously, Clemente, one of the best ever to do it, and is a huge benefit for a Pirates offense that can certainly use the help. It really changes the complexion of things. They're sending guys, Jake Stenzel out there. And again, the Pirates, remember, the Pirates made the playoffs last season. They made the wild card game, got knocked out. And really, with the roster that they have, that was a testament to them that they were able to do that. So now, if they've already been able to make the playoffs in one season and and they're in the hunt for it this year as well. They fired out of the gate this season, something like 18-4 to open up the year. The Cardinals have chased them down now as we enter June. but it's like a 1 or 2 game difference between the two teams at this point. So the Pirates are certainly in the thick of things. So to be able to do that with the roster that they've had, and now to add Clemente, is going to be a really, really huge pickup for Pittsburgh. Stargell will certainly appreciate the help. If you merge those two catcher picks, Tony Pena, exceptional defensively but weak at the stick, and Smokey Burgess, an outstanding offensive catcher but pretty poor behind the plate, you'd have one terrific catcher. A pick that doesn't really make a heck of a lot of sense for the Pirates. The Pirates still have Jason Kendall, who can't crack the lineup because Manny Sanguillen has been exceptional for the Pirates in all 3 years here of the FSBL. He's among the batting leaders here in year 3. He's just been absolutely terrific for Pittsburgh. So it'll be interesting to see if Pena or Burgess can manage to crack in anywhere. But right now, that job is Manny Sanguillen's, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. But the big addition there, Roberto Clemente, who will immediately become the starting right fielder for the Pirates when year 4 begins. Pretty much the only thing that the Arizona Diamondbacks have had going for them in the first 3 years of the FSBL has been the duo of Randy Johnson and Curt Schilling on the mound. They can't hit, and after this draft, they still won't be able to hit. The position player additions, Colin Cowgill, Abraham Almonte, Cliff Pennington, good grief, that is horrible. So the Diamondbacks are going to get no help at the plate, but they will bolster their rotation further as they try to win a series of 2-1 games over the course of a season. Brandon Webb, former Cy Young winner, he was a runner-up twice. Webb's career, of course, ended with arm trouble that he was not able to overcome. But Brandon Webb, a career 142 ERA plus in real life. Webb will be a huge addition to the Diamondbacks pitching staff, but it really seems that the Diamondbacks are going to have to wait until free agency starts to kick in here in the FSBL in order to really do anything offensively. They've got J.D. Martinez, Steve Finley, if you want to consider Steve Finley a strong offensive player, but that's really the extent of things for the Diamondbacks, who have just had a brutal go and have nothing offensively to cheer for, and that is not going to change in year 4 with this draft. But Webb's certainly a good pickup, and a Schilling, Johnson, Webb top 3 of your rotation can compete with most teams in the FSBL. The only thing the Diamondbacks have going for them with that draft is that at least they're not the Colorado Rockies. This is an atrocity. So bad that they even made a typo for their top guy in the draft. That's actually Todd Walker, not Tony Walker. Todd Walker, okay, he can probably crack the opening day roster for the Rockies next season. But that's more a knock on what the Rockies have than a huge compliment for Todd Walker, who had a couple of decent seasons, but Todd Walker isn't going to be an impact player there. And then Tony Wolters, Joe Kashansky, Connor Joe. I mean, those sound like guys who are made-up names, for like fictional players and stuff like that. The Rockies just get nothing out of this draft. Johnny Hayes, a pretty nondescript Negro Leaguer. So the Rockies do nothing to benefit them. And I'll tell you, their offense is actually pretty good. They had a very good offensive initial draw with Matt Holliday and Larry Walker and Todd Helton. But even some of the good guys from that initial draw, Troy Tulowitzki also. So they had a really good draw offensively. But the secondary guys, the gap between the top guys in that lineup and the bottom guys is fairly significant. The Rockies have actually hung around the 500 mark this season, but eventually pitching lets them down. And they've had a few offensive guys who've let them down. Vinny Castilla hasn't really done anything. Dante Bichette hasn't really done anything either. And the Rockies, to have any hope of contending for a wild card spot, kind of need everything to click, and they need dramatically improved pitching. And that doesn't come at all with this draft. Up next, we've got the Los Angeles Dodgers. And this is an interesting draft for the Dodgers because all of these guys are really solid players, but I'm not really sure where they fit in. Carl Furillo, can probably get involved in the outfield mix there for the Dodgers. The Dodgers currently sending out Zach Wheat in left, Hall of Famer, terrific player in Zach Wheat. Willie Davis out in center. Pete Reiser is starting in right field. Yasiel Puig gets some time out there. Carl Furillo will certainly fit into that right field mix. Pete Reiser has been very good to this point, and Puig has actually been all right also, but I figure Furillo will certainly be able to get involved in that at least depth mix among the Dodgers outfielders right out of the gate. John Roseboro will knock Steve Yeager down into the minors, but Roseboro, even though six-time All-Star, terrific player in his own right, he's not going to end up starting, as Roy Campanella currently has that position locked down for the Dodgers. Bob Welch, a Cy Young winner. Johnny Padres won an ERA title. Both of those guys, very good pitchers, but pitching has not been the Dodgers' problem. So they just kind of make the rich get richer in terms of rotation depth there. And Barney Morris was a very good two-time All-Star in the Negro Leagues. He won a couple of ERA titles in the Negro Leagues when he was pitching. So again, the Dodgers just continue to stack up really solid arms. But they have not been able to chase down the Giants. And the Dodgers probably could have used a big offensive bat to help them a bit more than what this draft does. But all of these guys can end up being factors down the line for the Dodgers. I'm just not really sure if anyone other than Furillo could have any impact in year 4. A solid and interesting draft here for the San Diego Padres. The Padres lineup has had virtually no punch to it. They've had Nate Colbert. Colbert had a terrific rookie year and has been decent the next 2 years. They picked up Adrian Gonzalez last year, so he's a rookie this year, and Gonzalez has been solid as well. And Jack Clark has been solid there, but the rest of their offense has no thunder. So they really have nothing coming other than the first baseman combo of Colbert and Gonzalez, 1 DHs. One plays first, but they're both lefties. And then you've got Jack Clark, who, in order to get Clark in the lineup, you have to play him in the outfield, where he's not particularly good, so they sacrifice something there. Bringing Ken Caminiti in at third base is a huge boost for the Padres in a division where they're going to have a hell of a time. They're a long way from even being able to consider contending for a wild card, certainly not the division with the Giants, the defending champs, on top there, and the Dodgers well ahead of them. But Caminiti at least gives the Padres a little bit of a step forward. They also benefit from Randy Jones, and Randy Jones is going to be one of the interesting guys as far as how I do the ratings for players here. Jones, career ERA plus 101. So for his career, he was just a tick above average. Starting ratings, when guys enter the FSBL, are based on their full career averages. Their peak is based on their top 3 years. Randy Jones, Cy Young Award winner in 1976, the ERA leader in 1975. So Randy Jones, at his peak, was very, very good. Will Jones be able to reach his max potential? If he does, he's a terrific get for the Padres. Regardless, he helps that rotation. It's not like the Padres have a huge amount of pitching depth, but just how big an impact Jones will have will depend on how quickly he develops towards his potential. Not everybody gets to their potential, so we'll see about that as far as Jones. They also add Sterling Hitchcock and Adam Eaton. Nice depth starters, both guys who can probably factor in for the Padres at some point down the line. Not terrific starters by any means, but guys who can help. Another interesting guy here, perhaps the most of all, Ted Radcliffe, one of the best nicknames in baseball history. Double Duty Radcliffe from the Negro Leagues joins the San Diego Padres next season, and Radcliffe is going to be the first player in the FSBL who I will rate using the ability to rate a player as both a position player and a pitcher. Radcliffe will be created as a catcher and a starting pitcher. There might be a couple of guys who I can go back and do that too, but nobody who did it to the degree of Radcliffe. So I'll give that another once over. They have to be guys who really prominently played both positions. So Radcliffe is the first one who I'm going to create in that fashion. He was a better pitcher than he was a hitter. Solid defensively. He was decent offensively, but he won an ERA crown in the Negro Leagues. Career 123 ERA plus as a pitcher in the Negro Leagues. Offensively, he was subpar. He was an 89, not horrible there. Very good defensively. So Radcliffe will be able to impact the Padres in both offense and defense going forward in year 4. We next get to the defending champion San Francisco Giants as we wrap up the National League. And the Giants, the rich get richer here, although this becomes one of those spots where how I do the league kind of comes into play a little bit here. I only rate guys for a defensive position if they played there at least 20% of their games in their career. Because I don't want the game kind of bastardizing lineups and, playing a guy who played third base 5% of the time in his career but was really an outfielder with a good bat and say, well, we're going to go and play this guy at third base. I don't want rosters being manipulated in that fashion. Orlando Cepeda played 231 games in the outfield in his career, but he played more than 1,900 games in his career. So he's not close to that 20% mark. So Cepeda is not going to be rated as an outfielder. This would be a huge benefit for the Giants if he was rated as an outfielder, because then Cepeda could become their everyday left fielder. No disrespect to Bobby Thompson, but Orlando Cepeda was a better player. So instead, Cepeda ends up just being rated at first base. He'll certainly find a way to get some time, but they're pretty locked in there with Willie McCovey at first, and they just added Roger Connor, who they drafted in last year's rookie draft. So Cepeda is going to end up kind of in a little bit of a fight for at-bats. He could potentially be a trade bait at some point. So we'll kind of see what happens with Cepeda, but certainly can't argue with picking up Cha-Cha, the great Orlando Cepeda Hall of Famer there. Ross Young's a terrific outfielder as well. Young's a 130 OPS plus for his career. He's a Hall of Famer as well, a lifetime 322 batter. So Ross Young's becomes a guy who can fit into that outfield. And Ace Adams was a terrific reliever for the Giants. Back in an era where there were not so many, just relief pitchers. Ace Adams fits the bill there, and he had a couple of outstanding seasons for the Giants. So he's going to bolster that bullpen. Ace Adams was going to slot into that bullpen and make an immediate impact in year 4. So the rich get richer out in San Francisco. So we move on to the American League part of the rookie draft, and we'll start off with the Baltimore Orioles. Orioles, solid first couple of picks here. They open up with Hall of Fame shortstop Bobby Wallace. Wallace, considered one of the best defenders, the best defender of his era, a terrific defensive shortstop, and was also a little bit above average offensively, which probably means the end of the line for Mark Belanger as the starting shortstop in Baltimore. Wallace, I think, is going to take over that role next year as he'll give the defense that Belanger does with a little bit more pop with the bat. So Wallace will be a big gain there. And the next pick, Adam Jones. Jones is going to benefit from a change that I'm going to be doing as I move from year 3 to year 4. As you know, if you follow the FSBL, in the offseason, I see if there's any kind of tweaks that I need to make to possibly make things a little bit better in the league. And the one that I'm going to do this year has to do with kind of lineup management a bit. I've mentioned earlier on that I don't rate players for a position where they haven't played at least 20% in their career. And that's limited, particularly outfielders, a little bit too much. So I'll rate a guy to play left field, but not right field, and that kind of thing. And I kind of think that limits things a little bit too much from a roster and lineup perspective, particularly as the game looks for pinch hitters and stuff like that, because it won't bring somebody in. It won't take a guy out if it doesn't have somebody who can go in to play his position. So you're not going to pinch hit for a right fielder who you really should pinch hit for if you don't have someone on the bench who specifically can play right field. So what we're going to do is basically I'm going to let anybody who played center field be eligible to play all three outfield positions. And if you played one corner position, you'll be rated for the other corner. So you'll have to have played center field in order to be rated. You'll have to have played center field at least 20% of the time to be eligible to play center field. But if you did play center field, you'll be rated as somebody who can be inserted into all the outfield spots. And I think that's probably a more realistic way of having the rosters managed. So Adam Jones, a 5-time All-Star, a terrific center fielder, but would be fighting Paul Blair out there in center field for the Orioles. Given the Orioles' current makeup, both of those guys should probably be playing. So that slight change will make the pick of Jones an extra positive for the Orioles. Todd Froworth can probably factor into that bullpen at some point. Froworth was a decent reliever for a few years. Fred Schulte, a nice depth outfielder. He can probably fit into the outfield mix for the Orioles as well. But Wallace is the big pick here, and Jones certainly a fine pickup for the Orioles as well, whose outfield defense, with the addition of Jones to join Paul Blair, should be really, really good. We move on to the Boston Red Sox, and the Red Sox add a Hall of Famer in their own right. Jim Rice joins the Boston Red Sox for year 4. The issue for the Red Sox is going to be finding out what to do with Rice. They've already got Ted Williams out in left. They don't have a real center fielder other than Reggie Smith. Smith, an outfielder, first baseman, but Smith played a good amount of center field in his career. Rice, Williams, Dwight Evans, Mookie Betts, all on the roster, but none of those guys are really center fielders. Betts comes the closest, but Betts doesn't reach the 20% threshold that we just mentioned either for center field, so he's not going to be... Betts can't play center in this league, so finding a way to navigate their corner outfielders is going to be a bit of a chore for the Red Sox here. It's certainly a problem that most teams in the league would like to have, but sorting out, I mean, obviously Ted Williams is going to play, whether it's left field or designated hitter. Ted Williams is going to play. That's obvious. Betts has been terrific, so Betts is going to keep on playing. So now you're finding a way to get somebody into that DH spot between Rice and Evans. Rice figures that he would probably get the lion's share there, and that's no disrespect to Dewey, who is a terrific player. But Jim Rice probably ends up getting the bulk of things there. But Rice, however it shakes out for the Red Sox, Rice is certainly going to be in that mix. Johnny Pesky plays shortstop and third base. The name behind the pesky pole out there at Fenway. He'll be involved there. Pesky probably becomes a bit of a utility guy. We'll see if he can overtake Dolby Moore. It kind of pushes John Valentin into a little bit further into the background of a utility spot. But having Valentin and Pesky as your infield utility guy is certainly not a bad place to be in. Rafael Devers arriving probably means the end of Jimmy Collins at third base for Boston. Collins has been decent but erratic, and I think that Devers should have no problem claiming the third base spot there for Boston. So a good draft here for the Red Sox. Buck Freeman and Negro Leaguer Miles Lucas round out the 5 players joining the Sox for year 4. We move on to the New York Yankees, who tell the Red Sox, we'll see you a Hall of Famer and raise you a Hall of Famer. Yogi Berra joins the Bronx Bombers for year 4. The Jorge Posada era will come to a screeching halt in the Bronx as Berra, 3-time MVP, 18-time All-Star, 10 World Series titles. The list goes on and on for Yogi Berra, who I admit whose face I do not look forward to creating. A unique-looking individual, but you certainly cannot say that this is anything other than an exceptional pickup for the New York Yankees. Berra excellent at the plate, excellent behind the plate. He will be a force for a Yankees team that already has been very, very good here. They made the wild card in year 1. They won the division in year 2. They lead the division here in year 3 as the Yankees look to continue to climb. Again, given the Yankees' history, the Yankees player pool is missing so many legends when you consider the fact that the Yankees have yet to draft Mantle, DiMaggio, or Ruth, and they've still been able to be at the top of things. It kind of gives you an idea, of just how deep that Yankees roster is. So Berra will join next year and make an immediate impact in the Bronx. As the Yankees and Red Sox continue to kind of stake their claim as the class of the American League East. Roger Peckinpah and Joe Collins, fine depth players in that Yankee system, but Derek Jeter and some guy named Gehrig at first base kind of have those two positions locked down. Joe Page, a very solid reliever, and the Yankees bullpen has not been great to this point. So Page will certainly help that out. Page probably slots into that bullpen right off the bat in year 4. Remember, the Yankees picked up Sparky Lyle last year, and Lyle has struggled here in his rookie year, but Sparky Lyle will obviously be fine. So, between Lyle and Page over the next couple of years, the Yankees bullpen should see a pretty solid step forward, as well as, of course, Yankee fans wait for the arrival eventually of Mariano Rivera. But a terrific draft for the Yankees. Berra alone makes it a terrific draft for New York. So after dealing with those couple of drafts, it is a precipitous drop here for the Tampa Bay Rays, who lead things off in their draft with Paul Wilson. Yeah, that's about that's about as significant a fall off as you could possibly get. The Rays add Wilson and Mark Hendrickson, reliever Albie Lopez, third baseman Jared Sandberg. Nothing much doing there for the Rays. I'm not even sure any of those guys crack the rotation. The Rays have a little bit of pitching at this point. Some of their more recent young starters are in there. Shane McClanahan. They have David Price as well. Some other guys who are escaping me at the moment, but the Rays pitching hasn't been their problem. The Rays can't score any runs, and nothing is going to benefit that from this group. Jared Sandberg is not going to be any sort of an impact player, because one of the few offensive players who the Rays have who has produced is Evan Longoria. So Sandberg is not displacing Longoria by any stretch anytime soon. Perhaps the big offensive pick up here for the Rays, and their best pick of this draft, is their Negro Leaguer, Vic Harris. Harris, a Negro League outfielder, a 112 OPS in the Negro League, 6 All-Star appearances. Harris will factor in year 4. A solid player, lifetime .303 hitter in the Negro Leagues. So he is the best pickup for a Rays team that has a long climb ahead of it. Wrapping up the American League East picks, we have the Toronto Blue Jays, and we'll kind of start from the bottom of this placard here and work our way up, as the Toronto Blue Jays once again use their Negro League pick and land an outstanding Negro League player. Andy Cooper, left-handed pitcher, considered one of the greatest Negro League pitchers in history. He also went on to be a good manager in the Negro Leagues until he had a heart ailment, and he died in his 40s. Check out the Sabre website. They do a terrific bio on Andy Cooper. That's well worth the read. But a career 122 ERA plus. He was 118 and 64 in the Negro Leagues. Cooper, a terrific pitcher. If you remember, of course, the Blue Jays dipped into the Negro Leagues last year to get arguably the greatest Negro Leaguer of all, Josh Gibson. Gibson, their starting catcher this year. And of course, Gibson having a little bit of rookie year struggles, but Gibson is certainly going to end up being a top player in this league. And now they'll have a nice Negro League battery of Andy Cooper pitching to Josh Gibson. So a big climb forward there for the Blue Jays, who've bolstered their pitching staff these past couple of years as they get Cooper here, and last year they picked up Pat Henkin and Hyun-Jun Ryu as well. So the Blue Jays are actually fighting for contention in the American League for a playoff spot this season. A nice climb forward for them. I'm not sure they'll ultimately get there, but next year with the addition of Cooper could certainly help. Shannon Stewart should be able to break into that outfield mix. They're sending out Alex Rios out there right now, Kevin Pillar. Shannon Stewart will certainly take one of those roster spots going forward. Dave Collins, Tom Underwood, Randall Grichuk round out the list there for the Blue Jays. But Cooper, certainly the big pickup, and to a lesser extent, Shannon Stewart, a very popular Blue Jays outfielder for many years there, will help the Blue Jays take another step forward in year 4. From there, we move on to the Chicago White Sox, who add their own Hall of Famer to the fold. Red Faber will jump in, and he will join the White Sox rotation immediately in year 4. Faber, again, Hall of Famer, 254 career wins, a couple of ERA titles, peaking out at 170 in the ERA plus category. He will jump in to a rotation currently led by Chris Sale, Wilbur Wood, and Ted Lyons. So Faber certainly will bolster that for the Sox. The rest of their pieces, a little bit of depth there. John Danks, Rich Dotson, Cy Acosta out of the bullpen. We'll see where Danks and Dotson end up. They probably don't factor into the rotation, at least for now, but they'll provide some depth down the line. And Negro Leaguer Geechee Meredith, a fairly nondescript second baseman. But when you land somebody like a Hall of Famer, you land somebody of Red Faber's caliber, your draft certainly has to be considered a success. And if you're a fan of the Pale Hose, you'll be very happy to see Faber joining your rotation next season. We then head to Detroit, and this is a fantastic draft for the Detroit Tigers. Again, the Tigers, we've talked about it, one of the most disappointing teams in the FSBL over the first couple of seasons, particularly year 1. They started a climb in year 2, and they currently lead the AL Central here in the second week of June, here in year 3. But they're going to bolster things next year. The top 2 guys on this list, huge. Hall of Famer Hal Newhouser will join the Tigers' rotation next year. The Tigers got a big boost to their rotation with last year's draft, adding Justin Verlander and Schoolboy Rowe. Verlander has been good. Rowe has been sensational. And now they will add Newhouser. He will factor in next season as well for the Tigers, as they're currently trotting out Lolich, Verlander, Rowe, Trucks, and Mark Fidrich. So Newhouser should be able to break that rotation next year. Again, Newhouser, for his career, 130 ERA plus, 207 wins. His run from 1944 to 1946 was among the best in baseball history. And Newhouser, once he reaches his peak, is going to really be dynamic for the Tigers. He is a great pickup, but Bill Freehan really changes the complexion of the Tigers. They've had Mickey Tettleton behind the plate. Tettleton not great defensively. Freehan, in addition to being an 11-time All-Star, a 5-time Gold Glove winner, Freehan will contribute better than average offense, excellent defense. He will push Tettleton into a more appropriate, perhaps left-handed designated hitter kind of role and backup catcher role, which is where he is best suited. So the Tigers help themselves offensively, defensively, and on the mound. That is the measure of a terrific draft. Dave Rozema, Drew Smiley round things out for the Tigers. But if you're a fan of Detroit, you've got to love those pickups. Add to that Cliff Bell, the Negro Leaguer. Bell, an above-average Negro League pitcher. Again, he doesn't crack the rotation at the start, but Bell is certainly better than some of the other guys who the Tigers have in the morning. So in the minors. So Bell could certainly be a good depth piece for the Tigers down the line. Just another reason to really love this draft for Detroit. Up next in the AL Central, we have the Kansas City Royals, and the Royals get a couple of useful players here. Jermaine Dye, a good pickup for a Royals outfield that can desperately use it. They've got Amos Otis and Willie Wilson out there, but that third outfield spot, right now they've got Danny Tartabull out in right, but the whole outfield conglomeration in that Royals group, is Tartabull, Jared Dyson, Michael Taylor, Andrew Benintendi, Brian McRae, Jim Eisenreich are the guys currently in the system right now. They've really been looking for a real solid third outfielder. Tartabull's certainly can contribute a bit, But Dye should take over the everyday role out in right field. That'll let Tarnable move into a designated hitter role, which is probably what he's a bit better suited for. Mike McFarland will be able to slide in here. He'll probably be able to spell Darryl Porter. Porter's been the starting catcher there for the first couple of years and here into year 3. McFarland can spell Porter, play against lefties a bit. McFarland, a very good defensive catcher, an adequate offensive catcher, but excelled defensively, so he'll be a nice pickup there. Larry Gora could factor into this rotation. Gora's not a bad pickup on the top 25 pitchers chart in the pool for, again, guys in Royals history based on their WAR ranked with the franchise. Larry Gora sets in at 9, but the Royals can pitch, so Gora may not be able to break that right off the bat. The Royals have gotten a very good draw pitching wise. They just can't hit. But they've got Apier, they've got Saberhagen, they've got Greinke and Leonard and Lee Brandt already. So Gora may be on the outside looking in, at least at the start, but he'll certainly be somebody who'll factor into the Royals in the seasons ahead. We move on to the defending American League champion Cleveland Indians. The Indians caught in a dogfight right now in the tightly packed AL Central here in year 3, but they've got some improvements coming for year 4 as the rich continue to get richer. Joe Sewell, the second-rated WAR shortstop on the Indians master list, will join the club next year. He figures to replace Ray Chapman. Chapman has done certainly a very serviceable job over the first 2.5 years for the Indians, but Sewell should ultimately end up replacing him as the starting shortstop. Al Rosen will have a little bit of a tough time cracking third base because Jose Ramirez has been so good. The Indians now have 3 of their top 4 at third base, as Ken Keltner is also in the fold out in Cleveland, but Ramirez, currently among the batting leaders in the American League, he has been terrific all 3 seasons for the Tribe. So supplanting Jose Ramirez will be difficult, but certainly nice to have some depth there at the position. Bob Lemon, another great pickup. Lemon is going to fight for the rotation. And the Indians, if you remember in year 1, the Indians' rotation was actually their demise in the opening year. They've bolstered that significantly, and now if you go down their list of starters, again, based on WAR, they don't have Bob Feller yet, but they have pitchers 2 through 8 on that list with the addition of Lemon, who slides into the 6th slot. So they've got Stan Kovaleski, Mel Harder, Addy Joss, the reigning Rookie of the Year and outstanding pitcher. But Joss is out for the rest of this season. I believe I think it's for the rest of the season. If not, it's a very significant chunk of time. He just suffered a broken hand, so he's going to be out for a while. Sam McDowell, Early Wynn, and Corey Kluber. So the Indians certainly have plenty of quality arms to pick from. And Paul Shuey, a very solid reliever in his career. He should add some depth to that Indians bullpen. So the Tribe set themselves up well for another successful season in year 4. We'll wrap up the American League Central portion of the rookie draft with the Minnesota Twins. The Twins, a big step forward last year. Again, they collapsed late last year, largely due to injuries. They had a 10.5 game lead at the All-Star break, but ultimately dropped the division to the Cleveland Indians when Joe Mauer, Chuck Knobloch, and I'm blanking on who else. Oh, and Joe Cronin all went out with injuries. So the Twins are in the fight again in this tightly packed American League Central here in year 3. They add a pair of Hall of Famers. Rod Carew and Heine Minush will join the Twins for year 4. Carew, if he doesn't do it right off the bat, it shouldn't take long. He will supplant Chuck Knobloch at second base. The big pickup here to me, though, and no disrespect to Carew, but Heine Minush, if you remember in the opening draft, the Twins got none of their top 9 outfielders in their 20 outfielder pool for year 1. Just a brutal draw for the Twins. They were able to draft Clyde Milan in last year's rookie draft, and now this year they're going to add Heine Minush to bolster what has been a very weak outfield in terms of production for the Twins. So the pickup of Minush could really be a big difference maker for Minnesota, who've had some trouble erratically in terms of scoring runs over the first 3 seasons. Cecil Travis, a very solid shortstop, but that position is kind of locked up right now by Joe Cronin. But Travis certainly gives them a bit of depth there, and perhaps they can decide to give him some spots there, move him around a little bit, get him some playing time there to rest Cronin at times. Certainly a good guy to have off the bench, if nothing else. Kevin Tapani probably can't crack the rotation. The Twins' rotation is pretty solid at the moment, but Tapani is certainly solid enough to give them some depth on that front as well. And Roy Wellmaker, a pretty run-of-the-mill Negro League pitcher. Again, he'll be a depth guy down in the minors for the Twins. But the addition of a pair of Hall of Famers in Rod Carew and Heine Minush, a huge pickup for Minnesota as they look to stay in contention in the AL Central going forward. We move on to the American League West as we start to the process of closing out here this rookie draft coverage. And we go to the Houston Astros. The Astros currently mired in the cellar of the AL West, and they don't really get anything here that's going to help lift them out of that. There are 4 players from their pool, Ray Knight and Bill Spires, Roger Metzger, and Hal Woodchick, all decent enough guys to have, but not an impact player among them. So the Astros aren't going to really get any help there. The best pick for the Astros in this draft, as far as quality of player, Negro League first baseman Ben Taylor, a Hall of Famer, a lifetime .337 hitter in the Negro Leagues, a 133 OPS plus, a just terrific bat to have. The Astros, of course, have Jeff Bagwell at first base, but you got to figure that Taylor can probably figure into that lineup as a designated hitter option, at least against right-handed pitching next season, and that will give them a bit of a boost there. But the Astros need a lot more help than that if they're going to try to make any headway on the perennial powerhouse Oakland A's and the much improved California Angels, who seem to be a team that's going to position itself to be in the dogfight for a wild card spot for several years to come. People have talked about this possible addition for a while as it relates to the Oakland A's, and it happens here with the addition for year 4. Dennis Eckersley joins an A's bullpen and overall pitching staff that has already been exceptional. Eckersley will join Raleigh Fingers out in that Oakland bullpen for just a lockdown end of the pen. Fingers has been terrific. He's had a couple of blips in the postseason, but overall Fingers has been outstanding, and now Eckersley comes in. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out for the closer role, as Fingers, as the incumbent, will probably get to keep that at least to start off year 4, but he won't have much room for error with Eckersley behind him. But an Eckersley Fingers as your 8th inning, 9th inning tandem just makes the rich get richer out in Oakland. Eck will have decent enough stamina, but he is going to be entered as a reliever. Not that Eckersley would really crack that A's starting rotation as potent as it is at this point anyway, which is the same problem that Mark Mulder is going to have against Mulder, a very, very solid left-handed pitcher, but the A's are so deep, Mulder is going to end up just kind of sitting in the minors waiting for an injury or for somebody to leave via trade or free agency. So Oakland still has Vida Blue sitting down in the minors as well, who they drafted last year. So the A's just have an enormous amount of depth on their pitching staff. Stuffy McInnes, a fine, 1910s, early 20s first baseman, but Jimmy Fox and Mark McGwire kind of have the first base DH combo locked down there in Oakland, so he's not going to get any time. And shortstop Monty Cross, along with the Negro League reliever Lefty Johnson, really just kind of roster filler guys who are unlikely to see the light of day, at least as long as they stay in the Oakland organization. But the Eckersley pickup, really just another huge one for Oakland as they continue to try to be the class of the American League. We move on to the Seattle Mariners, and the AL West has been such an interesting division because the A's are so good and the rest of the division has been very, very weak in its initial draw. It was going to kind of be the first of those remaining 4 teams to really take a big step forward, can kind of keep them in the wild card conversation in years ahead if they can clean up on the rest of that division. And right now, the Angels seem to have taken the lead there, and the Mariners are falling back a little bit, despite the fact that the Mariners have some good guys in their lineup. They have Ichiro and Ken Griffey Jr., obviously about as good a 1-2 punch as you can have there in the outfield. They've got Seager They've got Brett Boone. So, I mean, the Mariners have a little bit of potency on offense, but they don't really get anything out of this draft that is going to set up to help them. Carlos Guillen is not going to overtake Omar Vizquel at short. Ryan Franklin probably doesn't break the Mariners' rotation at this point, so he's going to kind of be a depth guy. Darren Bragg isn't going to crack this lineup, and neither is Tom Lampkin behind the plate. Although Lampkin actually could end up finding himself in a backup catcher role there, as Poindexter Williams, an old Negro Leaguer, has just not clicked behind the plate. Remember, they traded Kenji Jojima last year to the Baltimore Orioles to get Jim Gentile and Greg Olson. Those might have actually been two separate deals. I may be misremembering that, but they added both of those guys from the Orioles. So Dave Valley has been the leader at catcher this year. So Tom Lampkin may get a little bit of playing time, but certainly by no means an impact player. Clarence Lindsay, basically a Negro League utility guy who's just going to kind of be depth down in the minors. So the Mariners run the risk of falling a bit further, not only behind the A's, but behind the Angels as well, something they can ill afford. Up next, we have the Texas Rangers, and the Rangers have an interesting draft here. So Buddy Bell, obviously a terrific third baseman. You've had people say that Buddy Bell should be in the Hall of Fame, which I think is a stretch, but he was a Hall of very good kind of guy. Buddy Bell was a terrific player, but he's kind of trapped behind Adrian Beltre, but Bell's certainly a very good guy to have. He'll certainly be on the roster, and they'll find some at-bats for him. Pete O'Brien, on that Master War list that we talk about, is third in Rangers history, but the Rangers have their top two guys already on the roster in Rafael Palmeiro and Mark Teixeira. So O'Brien kind of left hanging there, but certainly Pete O'Brien, a solid bat that can contribute down the line. The best pick here for the Rangers may actually prove to be Jose Guzman, who should be able to fit into a rotation that is starting to improve a bit for the Rangers. They've got Charlie Huff, they've got Yu Darvish, they've got Gaylord Perry. And now Jose Guzman will kind of battle guys like Lance Lynn and Rick Helling and Dick Bosman for the back end of that rotation. But Guzman had a couple of really nice years, and I think he's going to be a contributor for that Rangers staff going forward. He's probably the most likely of those three guys to have an immediate impact. Although, like I said, I certainly think they will find a way to get Buddy Bell some at-bats as he joins the Rangers for year 4. And we close out the rookie draft for this year of the Franchise Stars Baseball League with the California Angels. Not really a great draft here for the Angels. Again, as we've mentioned a couple times earlier in this broadcast, the Angels are kind of regularly in the wild card hunt now, and they've set themselves up pretty well there. They've got a decent lineup. They've got a decent pitching staff. But to really be consistently there, especially with the improvement, you always know either the Yankees or the Red Sox are going to be in that wild card hunt, and that the AL Central teams have improved with the Tigers, the Twins, and the White Sox and the Indians. You got to figure that they're always going to have at least 2 teams in that wild card hunt as well. So the Angels are trying to keep pace with them more than they're trying to keep pace with the A's, and I'm not really sure this draft does that for them. They got huge impact last year when they added Don Baylor, who's been terrific here in year 3. David Eckstein can probably take over that shortstop job from Dick Schofield. Benji Molina will be able to spell Mike Napoli behind the plate a little bit. You can let Napoli DH and put the better defensively Molina behind the plate. Napoli's been a good offensive player for the Angels, so that helps them a bit there. Shigetoshi Hashigawa, a nice reliever who can contribute there to the Angels. So it's by no means a terrible draft, but it's kind of like an incremental increase for the Angels. They didn't get a real impact guy, and I think you might see the Angels struggle to keep up with those other teams that are in the wild card contention, as they need just a little bit more impact in order to keep pace. But so far, the Angels have done a really nice job here in the FSBL, a wild card team in year 1, contention in year 2, and they're currently in a wild card spot again here in year 3. And so that will wrap up the Year 3 rookie draft for the Franchise Stars Baseball League. I guess technically it's the Year 4 rookie draft. It happens in the middle of Year 3, but they're the players who will enter in Year 4. But regardless, we wrap up the rookie draft here. I hope you all enjoyed. I greatly appreciate you tuning in here, jumping on the channel, chatting with me a bit, and I look forward to your comments, not only here in the chat, but certainly if you're watching this after the fact, leave a comment down below. Let me know how you think your team or other teams in the league did. You can also always check in on the Facebook page or find me on the Discord and chat a little bit about how your team and the other teams did in the draft. Again, we had a lot of big names set up to join for next year. So I'm looking forward to wrapping up Year 3 and what's to come in Year 4, but you guys have made this a hell of a lot of fun, and I do greatly appreciate it. Updates coming on the website. I'll have stats and leaderboards as of June 1st. We'll do a bit of a draft recap on there as well as what's going on in the league. Franchise Stars Football League coverage will be back on the channel in the next coming days as well. But most importantly, thank you all. Be good to each other, and we will talk soon. The FSBL continues tomorrow.